for listeners who are blind, have low vision, or have another print disability which makes reading, holding a book, or turning a page difficult or impossible. The content is copyrighted by the respective publishers. For more information, please visit us on the web at nfradioreading.org.
Hello, this is Janice Marie Hunt, and for the next hour, I will be reading from the Sunday, January 11th, 2026 issue of the New York Times business section on the Niagara Frontier radio reading service. The man who could be Apple's next CEO. He controls $2.1 trillion, but is famous for a podcast. When Nicolai Tangen became the chief executive of Norway's sovereign wealth fund in 2020, he said he wanted to raise his profile. He succeeded via media appearances and weekly podcasts in which he talks with some of the world's top executives, including Elon Musk and Sam Altman of OpenAI. His two predecessors kept a much lower profile than Mr. Tangen, a billionaire former hedge fund manager. He says his more public approach is good for transparency and has given Norwegians greater exposure to the $2.1 trillion fund, which accounts for about a fifth of the country's national budget. But critics and some analysts say that his leadership style has exposed the fund to scrutiny and that he has elevated his personal brand without doing enough to explain to the Norwegian people why the fund has been so successful. Since Mr. Tangen became chief executive of Norges Bank Investment Management, which manages the fund, its value has risen about 80%. In March, he was appointed to a second 5-year term after being credited with delivering strong results. The fund was set up in 1990 to invest Norway's oil wealth in global stock markets. It operates at arm's length from the government, partly to ensure that day-to-day decisions are not influenced by politics. The Ministry of Finance has overall responsibility and sets an investment mandate for the fund, which functions as a broadly diversified global index fund. Portfolio managers are given little leeway to actively pick and choose stocks to try to beat the market. The model has been a huge success. Norway's sovereign wealth fund is in the world's biggest, with on average a roughly 1.5% stake in every publicly listed company in the world. An unusual pick. Mr. Tangen, 59, was a surprise choice to lead the fund after a lucrative career in finance in London. He divested his stake in AKO Capital, the hedge fund that he founded, and took a big pay cut in accepting the job. He said that taking the role was partly about giving back to Norway and that it combined his love of asset management and running a big organization. But Mr. Tangen was embroiled in controversy before he began his new post. His name did not appear on the official list of applicants, spurring questions about the recruitment process, and he was at the center of an expensive scandal that ensnared his predecessor. Despite early hiccups, he set out to take a public approach to running the organization. When he took over, his podcast, In Good Company, in which he has chummy conversations with business leaders and thinkers, is the most obvious example. Satya Nadella, the chief executive of Microsoft, explained on the show why poetry was like coding. James Gorman, the former Morgan Stanley boss, said the stress of the 2008 financial crisis often made him physically sick. Occasionally, Mr. Tangent goes into full content creator mode, like when he donned a Domino's uniform to make a pizza. The podcast has become his calling card, and he is especially animated when discussing the show. Talking to top thinkers and executives, he said, gives him lessons on how to better manage the fund. It also provides Norwegians with insights into the companies their money is invested in and helps the fund with recruitment, he added. But he dismisses accusations that it is about self promotion. This is the fund's podcast. This is not to elevate myself, he said in an interview in his office in Norway's central bank headquarters in Oslo. I believe in combining different disciplines, Mr. Tangent added. His own interests range widely from organizational behavior to Nordic modernist art and social psychology. The people who are the most creative, they are the ones who have the most different types of background and who combine information in a new way, he said. Mr. Tangent also opens on topics in the media that many business leaders have stopped talking about publicly for fear of provoking President Trump and his allies. In recent weeks, he has discussed the threat and opportunity of artificial intelligence and why lobbying in Washington has become a full-time job for chief executives. He has also continued to talk about climate change, even though it has become a toxic topic for many executives since Mr. Trump was reelected. We think it's part of a long-term investing that companies need to be sustainable, he said. We don't think climate is a political question. We think it's a financial issue. That's interesting. Increased scrutiny. As the fund has grown, it has attracted more attention. That pressure has become more acute in the past year as Mr. Trump has wielded economic policy as a tool to punish countries through tariffs and other trade barriers. But Mr. Tanger's public interventions have made things more difficult, analysts say. It was always a risk that raising attention to the fund made it more vulnerable, said Karen S. Thorburn, a finance professor at the NHH Norwegian School of Economics and the Wharton School, who served on the 2022 commission. He's putting the fund in the public spotlight and making foreign governments more aware of it. Others say Mr. Tangent has spent too much time pontificating. Espen Henriksen, an associate professor of finance at BI Norwegian Business School, said hosting a podcast in English on general business issues has done little to explain to Norwegians how the fund actually works. By elevating his own profile, Professor Henriksen added, Mr. Tangent has given the impression that he operates in the mode of chief executive of a big active investment firm like BlackRock or Vanguard. In August, those criticisms burst into the public consciousness over the war in Gaza and the fund's investments in Israeli companies with ties to the military campaign. After a political and public pressure campaign and calls for Mr. Tangent to resign, the fund sold its stakes in about half of the Israelite firms in its portfolio and stopped using an external Israelite fund manager to make its investments. It also divested from the American construction company, Caterpillar, where it was a top shareholder because the Israelite military was using its bulldozers in Gaza and the West Bank. Targeting a U.S. business angered the Trump administration, which called the decision very troubling. Professor Thornburn said the controversy threatened to undercut the fund's model as a non political investor. It was a worrying precedent, she said, adding that creating the perception that politics could weigh on investment decisions opened up the fund and Norway to retaliation. In November, Jens Stoltenberg, Norway's finance minister, suspended the ethical rules that underpin those decisions and said they would be reviewed. Norges Bank Investment Management declined to comment on the divestments. Mr. Tangent's visibility and personalization shift focus from the institutions to the individual, making the fund a bigger target for political storms, Professor Henriksen said. The fund's strength lies in boring, rule based institutions. Mr. Tangent does not appear to have radically changed his public approach despite the criticism. Last January, a local newspaper revealed text messages between Mr. Tangent and Mr. Musk that showed the pair had clashed after the fund, one of Tesla's largest shareholders, voted against a huge pay deal for Mr. Musk in his role as chief executive at Tesla. That's part of my role to have relationships with CEOs, Mr. Tangent said in an interview. He declined to comment on Mr. Musk's controversial involvement in politics and said he would now communicate with business leaders like him by email. Some folks thought text was too comfortable or casual, but he shows little sign of going quiet. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the New York Times business section on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. My manager is ill-tempered about sick days. I work a retail job. I have on the surface a good relationship with my manager. We work well together and we talk to each other about our personal lives. But whenever I come down with a cold or the flu, which happens a few times a year, he doesn't show much understanding. If I'm at work and say that I'm feeling sick, he doesn't ask if I need to go home. Furthermore, the onus is on me to find someone to fill in the next day. I've worked before while sick in Max because I felt pressure to. I realized that I should speak up for myself and enforce a clear boundary, but I'm hesitant to do so. When I get sick and need a day off, he sometimes says things that imply that I'm letting him down, and he has complained to me that workers take too much time off, leaving him to fill in. On the other hand, he often arrives to work late or leaves early at times without explanation. What's the best thing to do to avoid this situation in the future? Am I wrong to think that it's the manager's responsibility, not mine, to find coverage when I'm sick? Anonymous. The response: you're not wrong. In fact, in New York and California, it's illegal for your employer to require you to find a replacement as a condition for taking paid sick leave you're owed, even as a part-time or seasonal worker. Elsewhere, workplaces may differ, but even in states with less empowering sick leave laws, or those with none at all, staffing is usually a managerial responsibility for the obvious reason that when you're sick, you should be resting and recovering rather than scrambling to find shift coverage, or worse, working in public with an infectious disease. Is this annoying for managers? No doubt. But well, that's why they're paid more than you. He wants to use your ambiguous but pleasant interpersonal relationship to set the terms of what is, in fact, a clear professional relationship. This is exactly backward. A real friendship in the workplace can be cultivated only in the context of a settled professional relationship. He may not be consciously aware of what he's doing. When you give in to his pressure, you're showing him that a small amount of friendliness and a heavy dose of guilt are all he needs to offload his annoying duties unto you. But I don't think you need to have a one-on-one meeting or workplace summit to address this problem. If anything, I think you need to communicate with your manager less. Don't give him emotional leverage or opportunities for negotiation like excessive description or apology. I'm sick and I can't make it to work tomorrow is more than sufficient. Ignore any implication that you're letting him down. Working is not a favor you're doing for him. And if he explicitly asks you to find courage, simply tell him, I'm not in a position to do that. I'll leave it to you. This might make him angry or frustrated, but setting boundaries is always uncomfortable, especially when one party has benefited from their absence. The plight of the middle manager. I am a middle level manager for a business that has locations across the country. My employees here seem reasonably satisfied with the local situation, but often directives from the corporate office are annoying at best and obstructive at worst. The corporate office puts a great deal of stock in our annual worker satisfaction survey, which does not distinguish between what the employee likes about the corporate office and the local office. They have come down on our local leadership because our latest survey showed a lower satisfaction rate than the rest of the company. The negative comments on the survey were directed toward corporate policies, and our retention rate is one of the highest in the company. Yet, because the overall score was low, we have to come up with a remediation plan. I feel caught. If we emphasize that our local office is doing well and it is a corporate problem, we are accused of fostering an us against corporate culture. Yet, it seems as if our worker complaints are something we can't solve. Help, Anonymous. I suspect many readers breathe a sigh of recognition at this letter, which describes a familiar dynamic for middle managers, being caught between the frustrations of their employees and the idiocy of their bosses. You deserve credit for reaching a state of reasonable satisfaction, the most any manager can really hope for at your satellite office. It's exceedingly frustrating for that accomplishment to somehow become a liability. Unfortunately, such is the lot of middle managers whose duty is to absorb dissatisfaction from below and insanity from above and never complain. One option, of course, is to take your bosses literally. If they don't care about employee retention, but do care about employee satisfaction based on surveys, one straightforward solution would be to find new, presumably more satisfied employees. Letting go of people simply to satisfy your corporate overlords' need for positive survey results would mostly likely be bad for the company and worse for your soul. On the other hand, what's bad for the soul is often quite good for the career. Huh. Many middle managers have succeeded simply by acting as henchmen for upper management. But I can't recommend that course of action. Among other things, it would be a huge amount of extra work for you. Instead, perhaps you can turn the remediation plan in your favor. Rather than see it as a punishment, think of it as a means of advocating for yourself. An important tool in any middle manager's kit is bureaucracy, and making your case in the context of this bureaucratic process will go a long way toward easing the pressure you feel. Whatever kind of documentation is produced for this remediation plan should lead with your retention rates and include specific complaints about corporate policies from your employees. Even better, you can try to organize the remediation plan around positive ideas like improving communication between employees and corporate leadership or ensuring employee feedback reaches decision makers. Make it pointedly constructive and slather it in enough bland corporate speak, and perhaps you can avoid accusations of an us against corporate culture. If nothing else, it might buy you time until the next corporate intervention. After big gains, it's time to reassess the market. The U.S. stock market turned in an eye-popping performance in 2025 for the third consecutive year. This remarkable string of repeated, compounded, double-digit gains has bolstered the wealth of anyone with broad stock holdings. Celebrate your good fortune, certainly, if you've been riding the market's impressive rise. But this is also a good time to assess whether it would be wise to pare back some of the risk that stock investing entails, especially in this inconsistent environment. Where the markets are going in 2026 is the big question. Geopolitical tensions are high. Stocks of some oil drillers, traders, and refiners have surged, but most investors have largely shrugged off the decision by President Trump to order the capture of Nicolas Maduro, the president of Venezuela, by U.S. forces. The potential for trouble spilling into the market is enormous. However, Mr. Trump's expansive view of the U.S. prerogatives in the Western Hemisphere, he says, we need Greenland, might intervene militarily in Colombia, and can expect Cuba to fail, has alarmed American allies. U.S. military forces could easily be overextended, and the U.S. actions and threats might embody Russia and China and what they consider to be their own spheres of influence. Aside from global conflicts, any number of problems within the United States, including the slowly unfolding effects of tariffs, could set back the seemingly unstoppable U.S. stock market. Yet, there are plenty of arguments for the bull market to continue through a fourth year and beyond, starting with momentum, the propensity of a rising market to continue on an upward path, enthusiasm for the purported benefits of artificial intelligence remains strong. While stocks are expensive based on historical measures like the relationship between share prices and corporate earnings, U.S. companies are expected to churn out even richer profits in 2026. The widening U.S. budget deficit may cause problems for the bond market eventually, but for now, tax cuts combined with increased government spending are expected to add fiscal stimulus to the economy. What's more, interest rates have already dropped, and Mr. Trump will have more leverage over the Federal Reserve in 2026. He says he will announce his choice for a new Fed chair soon, and he expects his desire for even lower interest rates to be heeded by whomever he appoints. The Fed is widely seen as a crucial economic guardian, and if its vaunted independence were to be tainted, markets could plummet. Still, Wall Street is forecasting a great year. Such forecasts are based on little more than hopes and dreams. Nonetheless, for 3 years running, the stock market has outstripped the consensus forecasts. Remarkable returns. How strong has the market been? Suppose you simply invested in the S&P 500, the most widely followed benchmark for the US stock market, using a low-cost index fund like Vanguard. S&P 500 ETE, often known by its ticker VOO. Including dividends, VOO gained 17.8% in 2025. That follows surges of 25% in 2024 and 26.3% in 2023. Over 3 years, with compounding, the fund rose 86% through December. That means that if you had put $100,000 into the S&P 500 index fund 3 years ago, your stash grew up to $186,000. Whether you have been investing for retirement, a home, or a child's education, or if you are rich enough to dabble in the market for the prospect of seeing your money grow, this has been a remarkable good stretch for most U.S. investors. Financial portfolios, on average, have grown far more rapidly than average wages or the rate of inflation, an imbalance that may help to explain the strength of the economy despite relatively negative readings in consumer confidence surveys. Affluent people have been spending with gusto, stimulated by the wealth effect, a greater propensity to consume when the value of financial assets appreciates. I wouldn't push this too far, though. Not everyone reacts to rising stock prices. Many people don't look at their brokerage statements regularly and may not be aware of what happened to their money. But if that describes your habits, then this would be a good time to pay closer attention to your portfolio. Returns this gaudy don't typically last long. Risk abound, and if you think you may need some of your money for an important purpose in the next few years, it may make sense to shift some investments from stocks to safer holdings like high quality bonds and cash, a category that includes short term treasury bills, money market funds, and high yield bank accounts. The recent performance of international stock markets suggests that diversifying globally may help protect your returns too. Fresh figures. The final numbers for 2025 have arrived from Morningstar, the financial services company that has been tracking the performances of mutual funds and exchange traded funds for the New York Times for many years. Those figures show that as great as U.S. stock fund performance has been, many other global stock markets have been better over the last year. Bonds have also fared well, though corporate bonds are now richly priced. Here are some of the annualized returns for the average stock and bond funds for 3 months, 12 months, and 5 years through December. Domestic stock funds, including both actively managed and index funds, up 1.9% over 3 months, 13% over 12 months, and 9.9% over 5 years. The average fund underperformed the S&P 500 stock index and simple tracking funds like the VOO in each period. Taxable bond funds up 1.2% over 3 months, 7.6% over 12 months, and 2% over 5 years. Municipal bond funds up 1.4% over 3 months, 3.6% over 12 months, and 0.9% over 5 years. International stock funds up 3.9% over 3 months, 31.4% over 12 months, and 6.5% over 5 years. Diversified asset allocation funds with 50% to 70% stock and most of the remainder in bonds, up 2.3% over 3 months, 13.7% over 12 months, and 7.7% over 5 years. Wonderful as many of these returns may be, investing in diversified funds has its limits. While you get some protection, you miss out on the performance of a few brilliant stocks. NVIDIA, for example, had a poor quarter with a loss of 0.04%, but its return over 5 years was extraordinary, 70.3%, annualized according to FactSet, or nearly 5 times the performance of the S&P 500. Funds that focus on narrow sectors had extreme performances for better and for worse. Here are some annualized returns through December. Precious metal stock funds, which include gold miners, rose 16.7% over 3 months, 152.8% over 12 months, and 18.6% over 5 years. Latin America stock funds rose 6.2% over 3 months, 48.8% over 12 months, and 6.2% over 5 years. Funds investing in digital assets like Bitcoin fell 24.5% over 3 months and 11.5% over 12 months. This volatile category is too new for 5-year returns. Trying to pick the right fund or stock at the right time is hazardous, and I favor a simpler route. Looking ahead, I invest in public markets based on several important assumptions. While history may not repeat itself, I assume that over the long haul, the stock market will continue to outperform the bond market, but will be far more volatile. These markets are supported by the economy, which I assume will grow despite chronic problems and periodic upheavals. And I assume that no single market will always outperform all others. Therefore, diversifying globally and including safer assets like bonds and cash makes sense. This isn't easy. There are important questions to consider. What proportion of asset makes sense at different stages of life? Should you make adjustments based on the state of the market and the economy? I expect to spend more time discussing these issues this year. In the meantime, enjoy the positive returns if you have had them, but hedge your bets. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the New York Times business section on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. $770 million, the overhaul compensation for JP Morgan Chase chief executive in 2025. JP Morgan Chase had a good year in 2025 with its stock rising 34%. Jamie Dimon, the bank's chief executive, had a good year too, earning some $770 million through a combination of salary, dividends, stock grants, bonuses, and gains in his bank shares, according to disclosures from the bank. Permissive antitrust overseers, deregulation, and falling interest rates have made it an exceptionally lucrative time to be a banker. The New York Times' Rob Copeland reported, for years, the prestige and energy of a banking career had been shifting toward Silicon Valley and other branches of the financial services industry as banks faced scrutiny after the 2008 financial crisis. But now, the big banks are thriving. Their stocks rose 29% last year, almost double the rate of the rest of the market. And the industry's leaders are seeing major paydays. The chief executives of Citi and Goldman Sachs each netted more than $100 million last year. The chief executive of Capital One made more than $300 million, including a $30 million bonus in proceeds from selling stock. Some of Mr. Dimon's compensation can be traced to shares that he bought as far back as 20 years ago. A spokesman for the bank told Mr. Copeland, as opposed to his regular awards from the bank's board, which he leads, some of the dynamics behind this banking boom time are linked to the Trump administration, which has attacked agencies meant to regulate the industry and made it easier to deal in risky assets like cryptocurrency. But banks' rising fortunes are also tied to declining interest rates and improved commercial real estate market as people return to offices and the white-hot artificial intelligence market. Even as banks fly high, their executives are lacing their remarks with uneasy about how the economy is doing overall, especially after some high-profile bankruptcies, Mr. Copeland reported. Apple's next leader, some see this engineer. Around 2018, Apple considered adding a tiny laser to its iPhones. The part would allow consumers to take better photos, more accurately map their surroundings, and use new augmented reality features. But it would also cost Apple about $40 per device, cutting into the company's profits. John Ternus, Apple's head of hardware engineering, suggested adding the component to only the more expensive iPhone Pro models, said to people familiar with discussions who spoke on the condition of anonymity. Those devices, Mr. Ternus reasoned, tended to be purchased by Apple's most loyal customers who would be excited about new technology. Average consumers, on the other hand, probably wouldn't care. Threading the needle between adding new bells and whistles to Apple's products while watching the bottom line has defined the careful, low profile style of Mr. Ternus, who joined Apple in 2001. He is now considered by some company insiders to be the long-term chief, to be the front runner to replace Tim Cook, Apple's long-term chief executive, if Mr. Cook decides to step down. Apple last year began accelerating its planning for Mr. Cook's succession, according to three people close to the company who spoke on the condition of anonymity about Apple's confidential deliberations. Mr. Cook, 65, has told senior leaders that he is tired and would like to reduce his workload. The people said, should he step down, Mr. Cook is likely to become the chairman of Apple's board, according to three people close to the company. Despite his low profile, Mr. Ternus appears to have shot to the front of the pack to be Apple's next CEO, according to four people close to the company. But Mr. Cook is also preparing other internal candidates to be his potential successor. Two of the people said they could include Craig Federer, Apple's head of software, Eddie Koo, head of services, Greg Joswiak, head of worldwide marketing, and Deidre O'Brien, head of retail and human resources. Mr. Ternus, 50, is the same age that Mr. Cook was when he took over for Steve Jobs in 2011. Like Mr. Cook, Mr. Ternus is known for his attention to detail and his knowledge of Apple's vast supply network. Both men are also considered even-tempered collaborators, capable of navigating the bureaucracy of one of the world's wealthiest companies without ruffling feathers. Mr. Ternus' rising profile has caused debate among Apple alumni and rank and file employees again about whether he would lead Mr. Cook, who succeeded by making the company more predictable, and incriminable of Mr. Jobs, who laid the foundation for the company's success with risky bets and visionary products. If you want to make an iPhone every year, Ternus is your guy, said Cameron Rogers, who worked on product and software engineering management at Apple from 2005 to 2022. The question for Apple is whether the company needs an innovator or another dev manager. While it has been years since the quick success of the iPhone and iPad, Apple has made many small hits under Mr. Cook and continues to be one of the most profitable companies in the world. Apple also faces tricky challenges like navigating President Trump's frequently changing tariff plans and its dependence on Chinese manufacturing. Apple's plans for artificial intelligence are also a big question. While other giant technology companies have spent tens of billions of dollars on developing AI, Apple has largely been on the sidelines and has pushed off making major changes to its products with new AI technology. It will be up to Apple's board of directors to decide who will eventually replace Mr. Cook, who also sits on the board. The rest of the company's 8 board members did not respond to requests for comment, and Apple declined to comment and to make Mr. Ternus available for an interview. The Financial Times and Bloomberg previously reported on aspects of Apple's succession planning. Mr. Ternus, the youngest member of Apple's executive leadership team, would be Apple's first chief executive in 3 decades to have spent his career working on hardware. Unlike some of the other candidates to replace Mr. Cook, Mr. Ternus has worked on many of Apple's devices as well as the global operations that manufacture those products. But he would take over as a relative unknown outside Apple. Inside the company, he is known more for maintaining products than developing new ones, according to 6 former employees. And Mr. Ternus, who has been an engineer in Silicon Valley for all of his adult life, has limited exposure to the policy issues and political responsibilities associated with Apple's corner office. A California native, Mr. Ternus received a bachelor's degree in mechanical engineering from the University of Pennsylvania, where he was on the varsity swim team. For his senior project, he designed a device that allowed quadriplegics to use head motions to control a mechanical feeding arm. In the 4 years after his graduation from Penn in 1997, Mr. Ternus designed headsets and other products at a virtual reality startup. He then joined Apple, first working on screens for Macs as the company transitioned away from the colorful iMacs of the late 1990s. Within about 3 years, he became a manager, said Steve Seifert, Mr. Ternus' first boss at Apple. During that time, their team moved office floors, switching from a closed office plan to mostly open seating with a few offices. When he was promoted, Mr. Ternus had the option to move into one of those offices but declined. Mr. Ternus was a man of the people, Mr. Seifert said, adding that the decision to sit with his team most likely helped Mr. Ternus manage and motivate his staff. When Mr. Seifert retired in 2011, freeing up his office, Mr. Ternus once again said he wanted to remain in the open space. By 2005, Mr. Ternus had been promoted to lead Apple's hardware engineering team for iMacs as it made the G5 series, said Michael D. Hillman, who helped hire Mr. Ternus and worked with him at Apple for more than a decade. That team was working on using magnets to hold the computer's glass screen in place. Mr. Seifert said the technique was unusual for its time and faced skepticism, but Mr. Ternus still pushed for it. When presented with such an out-of-the-box idea, he would champion it, Mr. Seifert added. Mr. Ternus spent extended periods of time working with manufacturers in Asia, Mr. Hillman said. Mr. Ternus traveled between the continent and Silicon Valley and learned how difficult it would be to have a manufacturing supplier deliver on Apple's design expectations. Apple also paired Mr. Ternus with an external consultant to advise him on leadership. Mr. Ternus became a key lieutenant of Dan Riccio, his predecessor as Apple's head of hardware. By 2013, Mr. Ternus's role had expanded to include overseeing the Mac and iPad teams. In recent years, Mr. Ternus has shouldered more responsibility for updates to Apple's products. He spearheaded the iPhone Air, which was released last year with a new slim design, and was a key leader in Apple's transition from using Intel chips in Macs to using the company's own chips in 2020. Mr. Ternus has also been involved in Apple's experimentation with foldable phones, according to one of the people close to the company. He's a nice guy, Mr. Rogers said. He's someone you want to hang out with. Everyone loves him because he's great. Has he made any hard decisions? No. Are there hard decisions he solved in hardware? No. In a 2024 commencement speech at Penn's Engineering School, Mr. Ternus told graduating students that in the future, They would be proudest not of specific projects, but of the journey to make them all happen. Now, while you're on that journey, there's going to be many times in your career where you have to take on something new, Mr. Turner said. And sometimes you might wonder whether or not you can actually do it. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the New York Times business section on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Affleck and Damon put their spin on a Netflix deal. In The Rip, a movie debuting Friday on Netflix, Ben Affleck and Matt Damon lead an ensemble cast playing police officers dealing with a dead captain and some possible internal corruption. Loyalties are questioned, guns are drawn, it's not clear who's on what side. Mr. Affleck's and Mr. Damon's loyalties have been much more clear behind the scenes. The two and their company Artist Equity successfully pushed for a deal with Netflix that could have implications for an industry going through major changes. Nearly all Netflix shows and movies pay the cast and crew only a set fee determined upfront, a sharp departure from how the industry used to do business. Traditional studios prefer to pay most members of their production teams an upfront salary, but some people were also eligible to collect back-end payments if a show or movie performed well. Other companies have followed in Netflix's footsteps in ending any payments after a production's release. But under the contract, Artist Equity reached with Netflix all 1,200 people involved in the nearly $100 million production, whether Mr. Affleck or a production assistant will get a one-time bonus if the show performs well on the streaming service. We wanted to institute fairness and address some of the real issues that are present and urgent for our business, Mr. Affleck said in an interview. He said he and Mr. Damon formed Artist Equity in late 2022 with an investment from Redbird Capital for this very reason. This deal is fundamentally, philosophically, to the ideas we had in starting this company. The film lands on Netflix just a little over a month after the streaming giant shocked Hollywood with an $83 billion deal to buy the film and television assets of Warner Brothers, one of the industry's most venerated studios. The deal has left many in the entertainment business to wonder whether Netflix will demand contracts with all payments up front or will somehow adapt to more conventional ways. The RIP could provide some clues, and John Sloss, chief executive of Synthetic, an entertainment management and corporate advising firm. Maybe this deal, he said, is a precursor to the question Netflix is going to have to answer, and perhaps is a good faith attempt to figure out the upside sharing model with the filmmakers. Netflix has long said it had no intention of changing how it pays talent. Bella Bajaria, the company's chief content officer, said in an interview that Netflix's model of paying more upfront for films than the industry usually had, essentially baking in some of a back-end bonus before filming even started, worked for the talent and the streaming giant. A lot of talent likes that a company takes the financial risk and supports their vision and makes a movie. That's why we're not changing our model. Yet, she added, we are not dogmatic. We wanted to be in business with Matt and Damon. They are very entrepreneurial and always progressive and forward thinking about the business. And I think it's really cool and interesting that they've created this company this way. For the RIP, according to Mr. Affleck, no member of the cast or crew received the upfront bonus. Instead, the bonuses will be judged on the film's performance over 90 days on Netflix and will be rated against other films on the service. The idea is that there could be a bigger potential payout for the whole crew. Everybody who's in this movie from top to bottom or worked on the crew will be bemused according to the matrix which we've already defined and they've shared with us, he said. Mr. Affleck declined to share what those performance metrics were, but said a movie could reach different levels. The top one, he said, the Grand Slam, would require viewership similar to that of K-pop Demon Hunters, which with 325 million views by August is the most watched movie on the service. He said he had no expectations that the RIP would hit that. Mr. Affleck said he and Ted Sarandos, Netflix co-chief executive, first got to know each other during the writers and actors strike of 2023. Artist Equity was just a few months old, and Mr. Affleck was pitching his model around town. He said Mr. Sarandos had seemed more amenable to it than his competitors. I thought this is clearly somebody who cares about this business, wants it to work, is doing very well, and understands the value of filmmakers and performers and artists, Mr. Affleck said. The two companies first made a deal for Animals, an upcoming movie that Mr. Affleck both directed and starred in under Netflix's traditional pay structure. Once Artist Equity and Netflix established a working relationship, Mr. Affleck said working relationship was able to persuade Netflix to look at the back end bonus model for the RIP. Mr. Affleck said he thought that the back end bonuses could lead to better movies. As his calculus goes, you can motivate an entire set with a rousing speech, but motivating with the idea of future profits goes a lot further. I agree. Money talks. It really came from my own experience, not just acting, but directing and producing movies and wanting to get everybody on the set the same page, he said. You've got to create a great environment. You've got to empower people. You've got to connect people to the process. What I want to add to that is a comp structure that also reflects that, because the idea that you could expect other people not to care about their paycheck is crazy. That's crazy. Artist Equity is not the first to espouse smaller payments up front and bigger payouts based on performance. Others have argued that it would produce higher quality films. When the financial incentives of the people paying for the movies and TV shows are aligned with those of the creators, the overall system is much more cost effective, and often the movies and TV shows are better. The producer Jason Blum wrote in the New York Times in 2022. Ms. Bajaria said she was not adverse to making another movie this way, though she added that the company hadn't done so since this deal was struck some years ago. That's more a factor of what the town wants rather than what Netflix wants. We pay people in success or not, Ms. Bajaria said. People like the model we have. Mr. Affleck said he believed Artist Equity payment model was the way forward because it could both reduce the cost of making movies and be more sustainable. I want it to work because then I'm going to be able to make the argument in the future, Mr. Affleck said. Call the PA on the movie, call the gaffer, call the woman who was a project designer, and all of them will tell you, I saw a meaningful amount of bonus money. Money talks. You've been listening to a reading of articles and features from the January 11th, 2026 issue of the New York Times Business section. We read from the New York Times Business section every Thursday at 11 a.m. Your reader has been Janice Marie Hunt. Thank you for listening.
Coming up next in the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service, we have USA Today. Following that at 2 o'clock is episode number 11 of Mark Twain by Ron Chernow. Following that, the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service now presents a reading of articles and features from the USA